If you're listening to this podcast, I know you're willing to invest in yourself. So now is the time to step your game up. Get your copy of my book today, How to Corporate, Proven Lessons for Winning at Work. Available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I want to see you thriving personally and professionally, building the career you want, knowing your value, and maximizing it. Visit my website, howtocorporate.net, to get your copy today. I'm here to win, and I'm taking you with me. So let's go.
I remember being, in graduate school and even in my first job, looking at people who were in jobs and thinking, man, I could do that job. I could do that job, right? Like I'd see somebody make a mistake. Yeah. I'd be like, see, man, they pay that person way too much money to do that. I can do that, Yep. And I was in this space of like, I was super hype about my education and my background. It's not that I discounted the value of having years of experience, but I just felt like I was super smart and, I had this theory down. I could do the work. Yeah. So fast forward to sitting at this table, right? I recognized very, very quickly how important those years of experience were, right? And it's because it matured you. You had so much more context, information you could pull from your Rolodex to be able to respond to a situation early. And what I found sometimes, here's my point. What I found sometimes early in my career in leadership, executive leadership in particular, was I wasn't mature enough to handle situations or circumstances. So somebody will say something to me and I'll be ready to fire them up, right? I took it so personal. Yeah. Right? Like, I remember sitting with my supervisor and even one of my colleagues like, yo, man, you got to simmer down, man. Like, you can't blow up on somebody in the office suite. Like, you just can't do that. Right?
My name is Fela Abioye, and this is How to Corporate, my digital show dedicated to helping you identify what's holding you back so you can advance your career. Are you ready for today's topic? Well, let's get started.
Welcome back to another episode of How to Corporate. I am your host, Fela Abioye. Thank you so much for joining me once again. Remember, our purpose, our cause is to empower you, the working professional, so that you can advance in your career through other people's experiences. So I'm excited today to jump into another fantastic conversation with my next guest, a good brother of mine, Dr. Jackie Carl Thomas Jr. Sorry, brother, I put your whole government name out there, but
it's all right. It's out there. Google it, it'll pop up, man. They're gonna find it.
Hey, Google will find you no matter what. For sure. But no, man, Jackie, thanks so much, my brother, for gracing us here with your presence today. So I'm super excited to have you here, man. So let's just jump right into it, if you don't mind. Take a moment to maybe introduce yourself to listeners and tell folks a little bit about what you're doing in your current role.
Yeah, so as Fela mentioned, my name is Jackie Thomas, and I always like to tell folks, my full-time job is to be Melanie's husband and Mia and Jackson's dad, but that job doesn't really pay the bills. So my paid job, I've been in the field of higher education for a little over 19 years and currently serve as the vice president for student success at a large community college, and have the opportunity to work with an amazing group of staff and students to support all things student services, from advising to admissions to student life to student engagement. So, it's an amazing field that a lot of folks don't know about, right? I remember being at U of H and finding out for the first time that the people that worked in student activities and residential life and housing got paid to do their job. Like, you make the assumption that they're making money, right? But you really overlook the fact that those are paid positions and opportunities for people to really give back. And once I found that out, it just kind of opened my eyes up to a whole new career pathway and, jumped head in. And I've been doing it for, the past 19 years and absolutely love it, man. I couldn't found a better profession for me, for my skills, for my passion. And it's come on a professional journey, man. So excited to be here to talk with you, brother, and to hopefully lend some more insight into this very, very amazing field that we call higher education.
Yeah, no, man, I appreciate you sharing that. And I think it's really cool perspective, right? When you think about just your first interaction when you walk into a college campus, right? Typically folks that work in, either student housing or student development and things of that nature. And so, you don't always think about the other, piece of that this can be a career, right? This is something that you can strive for and kind of really progress in within that field. So on that token, right? I mean, you've been doing this higher education, thing for a while now, for almost 20 years. And,
Yeah.
you're almost at the top of the mountain, really, in your field. For anybody who's thinking to themselves, either current in college student or, if they're getting their master's or doctorate or, just curious about like what kind of different career paths or what's the typical career path can one really walk through in order to progress kind of to get to where you are in your level in higher education.
Yes, that's funny. So you're asking somebody who took a very atypical route to get to his field. I mean, to get to where I am. So, I started my career really working in student activity. So without giving the full details, when I graduated from U of H, I went to Florida State University for my master's degree in higher ed, and I spent 2 years working in student activity. So activities, programs, that type of work. And immediately upon graduation, went to the University of Houston, so back to U of H, and spent the next 6 years working in residential life and housing. The first part leading a retention program, and the second part doing actual kind of facility management, right? So overseeing a building. So my first, first 6, 7 years was on the kind of the student affairs side. So most folks, when you think about higher ed, you see two sides: student affairs, academic affairs. Academic affairs is going to be your faculty, your deans, your provost. Student affairs is going to be, your coordinators, your deans, your directors, student services deans, deans, directors, assistant deans, vice presidents, all of student affairs or student affairs functions. So, first 6 or 7 years, student affairs. And then my first job working at a community college was as a faculty member. So I went from student affairs to being a faculty member. I taught full time for 3 years, and then worked my way up through the instructional side of the house. So faculty, assistant dean of instruction, and then had a really awesome opportunity to manage both professional development and marketing and communication. So a completely different side of the house, right?
Yeah.
So now you've got academic affairs, student affairs, and you start to realize that there's like the marketing, communication, branding side of the house, or like the facilities management. And then served as the chief strategy officer for about 6 years. So, and then became the vice president of student success. So, I think for folks who are entering into the field, who see a very clear pathway on either side, I think it can be relatively easy to find, right? I mean, if you're committed to student affairs, it's, your coordinators, managers, directors, assistant deans, kind of that pathway. And then for folks who are thinking the instructional side, assistant professor, associate professor, full professor. It looks different at community colleges in 4 years, but I think that would be your traditional pathway, right? It's kind of following that assistant professor, associate professor, department chair, dean, like associate dean, right? That kind of pathway that way.
No doubt.
But higher ed is just so fluid right now. I mean, I think while we're looking for people who may have a specific set of skills in an area, we also just want folks who care about students being successful, right? And at the end of the day, that is foundational to the work. Obviously, you've got to have a certain set of credentials to be able to teach in a classroom, but we, like many other industries, are exploring new avenues in the field. We've got folks now that are doing like data analytics work. It's a huge part of our higher ed kind of atmosphere right now. Or, we've got these, a chief strategy officer. You didn't see that 15 years ago, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, it's a long way of saying, I mean, I think, I don't want to say gone are the days of a traditional career pathway. I think if you follow it and if you're persistent, you can work your way up through the student affairs, academic affairs side. I've got a colleague who worked in student affairs and is now over the budget, over finance and administration. So you just never know where this field is going to take you, right? I mean, you learn so many different set of skills in each of the areas, and then when an opportunity opens up, you jump on it. So I think foundationally, though, getting to where I'm at is just hard work. It's persistence. It is letting people know what you want to do and letting folks help you get there.
That's awesome, man. No, that's well said. I mean, big kudos for you to take on all those different opportunities, man, to really try some new skill sets along the way. I think that is a recipe for always having a good career is being able to try new things, right? Being in an environment that also allows you to try new things. And so it sounds like higher education has been changing and maybe evolving over the course of even your own career. So where folks may have saw a quote unquote linear path where no, it's way more broader nowadays. And so you can do a lot of different things that you may not have thought that you could do in the past. And it's always good to hear stories like yourself, real life examples of folks who have gone out and done it themselves, right? To be able to see that, okay, this may be something that I can go out and consider doing. So that's really cool, man. Awesome.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. It's interesting too, man, because
yeah,
the field's also, we are competing with, you know, corporate, on a
yeah,
traditional corporate jobs.
no, for sure.
We're competing with nonprofit, right? Because of
Mm-hmm.
our pay structure at times. You got folks that are coming into higher ed and,
Yep.
can look across the way and see a job with similar set of skills paying
Mm-hmm.
double, or opportunities to work remotely, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even that is changing the dynamic of our field, where folks who typically have gone in and like, yo, man, I'm a higher ed lifer. I love this field. I want to do
Yeah.
it.
Mm-hmm.
Things are now changing, right? That linear pathway is going away because, you see a job with a similar set of skills in another industry that's going
Mm-hmm.
to pay you a little bit more money, or may have a little bit more flexible work schedule, or,
Mm-hmm.
opens your eyes up to just another opportunity. I've got a lot of folks that I graduated from graduate school with who
Yeah.
aren't in the field anymore, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we're just really in that unique place of, while our hope is to feed you through one of those pathways and get you up
Mm-hmm.
to the mountaintop, right? We also got to recognize that we're also competing with not only other higher ed institutions, but other
Mm-hmm.
industries in general for the talent that we've got in our field.
Oh, man, that's well said. That's definitely well said. And I know I can uh, speak to it as an outsider, right? I mean, as you know, right, man, my wife spent some years in higher education as well at U of H, and so, and I think the pandemic definitely kind of blew up things for good or worse, or whatever you want to call it, for everybody, and kind of forced
Yep.
everyone to change things about what we thought was traditional and quote unquote the right way to do it. And so, remote work and having way more online classes and online availability, right, to the work that we do is definitely a big piece of that too. So yeah, no, but that's awesome, man. So I definitely want to talk about feedback, right, because that's one of the big points of our conversation today is feedback. And so, someone once told me that feedback is a gift, right, and over the course of my years within the corporate world of call it 14 almost 15 years now, give or take, I definitely say that feedback has played an instrumental part of my life and my own personal career goals. But also sometimes, feedback in the wrong hands, right, can be a bomb, right, waiting to go off.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it can be a gift, but it could also be a weapon. So with that said, man, I gotta imagine over the course of your career, you probably received feedback that you either agreed with or did not agree with. So when you think about how that relates to your own career, maybe walk us through an example of how you faced some feedback that was maybe not so welcoming and how you went about that.
Yeah. So I'll start very basic, right? I think the
Okay.
first year I started teaching, right? I mean, as a faculty member, a full-time
Mm.
faculty member,
Yep.
you get feedback after every course, right?
Hey, listen, as a
And-
former student, I'm, I'm, I'm certain I was
right.
probably on that list, right? Especially if you don't do well in the classes. So,
Facts. So you
yeah,
so you've got like the formal written feedback through the
yeah,
evaluation process. Then you've got
hmm,
mechanisms like rate my professor. You've
yep,
got obviously, I think really strong faculty members are collecting feedback throughout
mm,
the semester and using that to be able to pivot and make adjustments to really support the students' learning. So my first 3 years, I got feedback in this order, right? So the first was he um, he wants us to be his friend, right? So like I stepped into the job.
yeah,
I think I may have been early 30s, and for me, it was really important. Like there was this hashtag going around, like hashtag, do I look like a professor? Right. And it was trying to break down the stigma of what people traditionally look like. And for me, I also wanted to break down the stigma of what people perceive their instructor to be. So for me, I wanted to be relevant, right? I was trying to infuse hip hop and pop culture into my class. So the feedback I got was like, he was, tried to be too relatable, loose on like expectations. So I took it in year 2. I was like, all right, y'all gonna get this straight, narrow, we gonna go by the rules. And the feedback that I got was he got to loosen up, right? And it wasn't like career ending or detrimental or like I need to meet with my department chair dean feedback, right? But I share this example because the 3rd year is where I found the sweet spot, right? Of who Jackie wanted to be as a faculty member. And that was so critical. Those 3 years were so critical to how I receive feedback and apply it to make myself a stronger leader, right? Because that idea of establishing your own identity as a leader and using feedback to be able to form that came from those 3 years of teaching, right? So recognizing that there is an element of fun and relaxation that comes from Jackie the leader. There's also an element of structure and intention and discipline that comes from Jackie the leader. And then there's a sweet spot of both. And all of that was based on feedback from students that I then took and used to replicate in how I lead over time, right? And it's been foundational to who I am as a coach, as a mentor, as a supervisor, as a leader, as a vice president, is being able to take that feedback, not take it personally, but use it to establish my identity, my brand, my philosophy, and how I lead, and allowing that to drive me as a leader. And I mean, it was game changer for me. It was so important and so critical to how I lead, and not only that, but how I move as a friend, how I move as a father and as a husband as well, right? Yeah. Finding ways to hear those feedback points and make those adjustments and to not take it personal.
Yeah, bro, I love that example for multiple reasons, but one of the big ones why I love that example is at times we receive feedback in one hand, and then we try to figure out how to react, and then we receive feedback in another hand, and then now we're confused what the left hand versus what the right hand should do, right? So
yeah,
you got feedback in one direction from your students, you took that, you were open-minded enough to be able to make some changes there, and then you made another, you got feedback again, and a lot of people can halt on the keeping their minds open to receive feedback after that second opportunity, because you're like, well, hold on, I just made all these changes based on the feedback you gave me before. Now you want me to do all the things that I was already doing, right? And people can sometimes break down and lose that feedback loop, right? Because it's a constant loop that has to continue to kind of go around and around. And so you can kind of put it to a halting stop when you don't feel like the actions that you are taking, right, are being well received, right? And so, but the fact that you kept retooling it and then you found the right space, right? Once you found to the 3rd year, I think there's a lot of power just in that story and a lot of lessons that people can learn from figuring out how to tool, figuring out how to listen to feedback and discern it for yourselves, but still be able to make some changes, but still staying true to yourself, right? Which we'll talk more about, in our conversation. But I think that one example definitely highlighted a lot of that, man. So really appreciate you sharing that for sure. In relation to work, how has it been maybe instrumental to your career, right? You talked a little bit about how it was early for you as an instructor, right? But clearly, you progressed and kind of moved on since then. Has there been anything else like that's been super pivotal in your career and how feedback has maybe played a factor for you?
Yeah, I think so. So I was really fortunate to, after teaching, so I spent 3 years teaching, and then, we had some organizational changes that landed me on our president's executive cabinet, right? So I was, I had just a few years finished up my doctorate, and now was sitting at the table with our president, fellow vice presidents as an assistant dean. And it was extremely terrifying, right? Like you're sitting in a room with people who've got 20 to 30 years more experience than you with this expectation that you've got to contribute, right? And I spent the first probably 4 or 5 months just listening, right? Sitting in that space, listening, learning, watching, and doing my best, right, to make sense of the new information that was coming in and building up my confidence to be able to offer my thoughts, my feedback, and my recommendations to how we could move the organization forward. And I remember being, in graduate school and even in my first job, looking at people who were in jobs and thinking, man, I could do that job. I could do that job, right? Like I'd see somebody make a mistake.
Yeah.
I'd be like, see, man, they pay that person way too much money to do that. I can do that,
Yeah.
And I was in this space of like, I was super hype about my education and my background. It's not that I discounted the value of having years of experience, but I just felt like I was super smart and, I had this theory down. I could do the work.
Yep.
So fast forward to sitting at this table, right? I recognized very, very quickly how important those years of experience were, right? And it's because it matured you. It matured you. You had so much more context, information you could pull from your Rolodex to be able to respond to a situation early. And what I found sometimes, here's my point. What I found sometimes early in my career in leadership, executive leadership in particular, was I wasn't mature enough to handle situations or circumstances. So somebody will say something to me and I'll be ready to fire them up, right? I took it so personal, right? Like, I remember sitting with my supervisor and even one of my colleagues like, yo, man, you got to simmer down, man. Like you can't blow up on somebody in the office suite. Like you just can't do that, right?
Yep.
And I took all of that feedback to heart. I didn't take any of it personal because I knew that they all were coming from a place of growth. It allowed me those moments, those conversations, those experiences. I was so grateful that I came out of those relatively unscathed because in retrospect, those things could have been like career ending for me. Or it could have been, I could have said something to somebody who knew somebody that could have stopped my progression. So I'm very grateful that I had colleagues who would say, hey, look, here, let me give you some feedback on how you should respond to the situation.
Hey, my name is Fela Abioye. In 2021, I founded the How to Corporate podcast show with the mission to empower you and accelerate your career leveraging other people's experiences. That mission has since taken me on a journey to publish my first book, How to Corporate, Proven Lessons for Winning at Work. I can't tell you how excited I am for you to read this book. This book is a culmination of insights, strategies, and real-world examples based on my 15 years of experience successfully navigating and leading in corporate America. Whether you're just starting your career, looking for a change, or want to level up, this book is packed with tools, exercises, and information to position you to win in any environment. Get your copy on Barnes & Noble or on Amazon. Just search the name, How to Corporate, Proven Lessons for Winning at Work, or check out my website, howtocorporate.net. I'm here to win, and I'm taking you with me. So let's go.
So I used to, and still to this day.
Yeah.
So I save emails. If somebody writes a really dope email, I'll save that just as reference. If there are things that I can emulate from others, I will take just to make sure that I'm continuously working to make myself better. So sometimes the feedback is coming directly from somebody's voice, and other times it's through action, right?
Yeah.
So I'm observing my colleagues, mirroring or role modeling examples that I then want to emulate. That's going to make me a better leader. It's going to make me handle the situation better. So just that time in my career early on our executive leadership team, man, it was pivotal because I saw myself make some mistakes. I was self-aware enough to be able to receive the feedback and make the changes. And then over time, like even in my evaluations, I would be very honest about where I was. I've got to grow in, whether it was communication or supervision. And I would take that feedback. I would ask my supervisor, I need you to tell me how I can get better. I want to get better. And then simultaneously, Fela, also taking in the good feedback. I think sometimes when we think about feedback, it's always constructive, but also doing a better job of like really owning the things that I do really well, right? So, somebody may come to you like, yo, bro, super proud of the podcast you're doing, man. It's dope. Oh, man, I'm just doing my thing. As opposed to like, man, I appreciate that, right? Like receiving that feedback, internalizing it, and allowing, what somebody's sharing with you to make you better. Like if somebody's like, yo, you're a great communicator. You know what, man, I appreciate that, right? And receiving that feedback. So those 5, 6, 7 years soaking it up. And there were moments where it didn't feel good, man. It stung, But one of my homeboys used to tell me this quote: "Other people are the mirror in which you see yourself." Right. Oh. So if you want to know how you're acting or responding, ask somebody else. They'll tell you. And any chance I can drop that little gem, I dropped it because it's true, bro. It's so true.
No, man, bro, you dropped a ton of gems in there, man. A ton of gems. I mean, as you were talking, I was thinking through it, man. Self-awareness is definitely a big piece of this, man. I mean, you've got to be, if you don't have the ability to look back at yourself, right, the feedback loop again stops, right? It stops in its tracks. You don't have the opportunity to be able to look at yourself and say, okay, what part do I own in this feedback? What part do I own in this feedback? Because I play a part. Because whether you agree or not, you play a part. So it starts there, man.
But one of the many gems that I will take from my current supervisor is this idea of reacting versus responding. She talks about it all the time, right? Just the reaction, the way that she describes it, right? The reaction is like the nuclear bomb, right? Like something happens and you immediately like blow up and you're angry and you're frustrated, versus respond is more of that, like take a moment, take a step back, reflect, and then be able to articulate your challenge or, your concern or your feedback in a way that it is receptive. And, I mentioned a moment earlier, just examples of me reacting. In fact, I would say that, the first part of my career was very much reaction, right? Because I just, I don't know if it was maturity, if it was ego, it could have been a combination of a lot of different things, pieces of all of that I wouldn't even say forced me. I just did not handle situations the way that I should have handled them, right? And it's not like I was a ticking time bomb. I've been, the career path that I've had has been amazing. I think because of talked about earlier, just kind of the self-awareness and the willingness to receive the feedback. And I'm grateful that some of the mistakes that I made were early on in the career where I got some passes. But I reacted a lot, right? And I think over time, you realize how much more productive things are when you do respond, right? And it's a reflection of, I talk a lot about just what it means to be a young Black man in executive leadership. And while I don't walk around every day with this like burden or this pressure, I do recognize that people watch me and people pay attention to me. And I think it's important for me to be able to role model just when somebody comes at you sideways, right? How you handle it, right? It's like the finesse that you're able to put on it, or what you show people, how you show people that little things that would traditionally trigger somebody else, it doesn't trigger you, right? It rolls off your sleeve, or
no doubt.
You've had enough experiences to be able to pull something to respond in a way that is perfect for the circumstance, right? It allows you to disarm a situation. It allows you to, it puts the power back in your hand, right? To be able to reflect, think through what's the most appropriate response. And it's like the, it's like, when somebody sends you a nasty email and you want to fire off that per my last email, right? Which typically is not very productive, right?
Yeah, respect.
It just it's the recognition of, all right, this is something I need to 10 hours to wait to respond to, where
Mm-hmm.
I'm more level headed.
Don't hit send. Don't hit send.
Don't hit send. Don't hit send. And then try to retrieve the email, right? Once you
Exactly.
realize what you
Yeah,
sent
like,
was
oh
grinding.
yeah, exactly. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, bro. No,
So that has been game changing. It's been game changing, bro. Game changing. Just the
yeah.
level of it's like the level of confidence that comes with responding, the level of clarity that you have. Like it's like things don't bother you as much, right? Because don't take things personally. And for me, that's so true, right? Like a lot of times when people are coming at you, it's not necessarily about you, right? It may be something that they're dealing with, and as opposed to reacting in a way where you feel like it's personal, you know, it may be that they can't, like, they were at home with a sick kid, significant other couldn't watch the kid, so they had to come to work, and right. So it's a tough day, right? Like we all got life, so your choice on how you respond to a situation really could dictate how the rest of that person's day goes. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't have hard conversations, and it doesn't mean that you don't handle things that need to be handled. But I think in my opinion, it's not productive.
It takes.
And hold on. Let me show you something, dog. Just to kind of drive this point home, man.
No,
so like,
please.
I'm like really big into symbols, man. Like, so there was a moment where like I had to remind myself that, right? Like saying and doing is one different thing, man. But I was going through a really hard time, bro, and I got coins pressed.
Hey,
right? Like I literally went and
dope.
got a physical coin, right, to remind myself, like, to respond, right?
Yeah,
right.
So
I
awesome.
keep one in my wallet. And if I know that I'm going into a meeting that can go hostile, I just take this and I slip the coin right next to my laptop.
There's that physical reminder, right, to keep you mentally in check, right?
Yeah, facts.
Bro, I love that. No, that's I may have to ask you to print me up a couple of those, brother.
Hey, look, bro, I got plenty, man. You need some? I got them, bro.
No, bro, man. Listen, I'm telling you, this right here is a game changer. It's not just. I know we're talking a lot about careers, but there's so much of the power if you can really quote unquote master this, right? How you will be so much better off in just how you handle your relationships in general, relationships with your significant others, relationships with your kids, relationship with your coworkers, just relationships in general, just just effective communication skills, right? So, when you were talking about this, it reminded me of a prior episode I had one of my guests, David Anderson. We were talking about translating skill sets, and we had a small subject comment around feedback, and he was telling me a practice that he has is when he gets feedback, he always writes it down, and because what he wants to take the tone out of the feedback, right? Because he may be getting feedback that he may or may not necessarily like or agree with, or maybe he does agree with. I don't know. But I want to take the tone out of the feedback, and I would just want to read it for what it is, so that way he can more easily digest the feedback. Is also, I think, a really good skill set that he mentioned as well, and it allows you to not just react.
Yeah, man, you hit the nail on the head, right? Because it's applicable to everything, right? It's life. It is, parenthood. It is friendships. My wife, she told me something that stung, bro. She said to me a couple years ago, I wish you put the same level of like energy and effort into our marriage that you did in your job. And I was like, ooh, right? Like it stung.
Yeah, yeah.
That hit hard, right?
Yeah.
And you talk about feedback, right? So scratch all the feedback I'm getting at work, right? I mean, I started this episode with, my full-time job is being Melanie's husband and me and Jackson's dad. So Melanie saying, bro, you stinking the job up? I mean, that stung, right? Like that's feedback you don't want to receive, right? But to your point, right, about, taking the emotion out of it, right? And hearing what is being said, that feedback made me a better husband, bro. Like in that instant, right? It made me a better husband and it made me a better dad, right? And our marriage has been thriving, right? off of my wife being willing to share something, me being able to receive it, and then doing something about it, and then having a mechanism to be held accountable to that feedback, right?
That's the feedback loop, baby.
So
Yeah,
that's the loop, bro.
that's the loop, man. Is the getting the feedback, receiving it, taking being able to digest it, and then taking action on it, and the follow through. Right, that's the follow through. So many times, man, we drop the ball, and somewhere within that loop, and a lot of times it's after receiving the feedback, it's taking action and then following through with it. So, but bro, man, that's a powerful message. I appreciate you really sharing that, because I think that's really big and that people need to hear. But it's a lot of the stuff we've already talked about, but the self-awareness piece, right, is a big piece of it. The fact that he trusted you, right, because you gotta have a certain level of trust in order to give your feedback, right, and to be able to receive it. There's a certain level of trust that you have to have. So another comment you made when we spoke earlier was that people that struggle the most, typically in their careers, are often resistant to feedback. Of course, I tend to agree. But why do you think most people are typically resistant when it comes to just feedback, right?
Hey, if you're enjoying what you're hearing and learning something new, take a second to rate this episode and write a review. Oh, don't forget to share with a friend or a colleague. All right, back to the show.
Yeah, I mean, several things come to mind. I think one, people take it personal, right? First off, you never want to hear what you're not doing well, right? I mean, it's the reason why, Gallup is making so much money on the work they do around strengths, right? So they've taken this kind of positive psychology work and said, let's focus on what you're great at, not what you don't do well. So I think people are wired to not want to hear what they don't do well, right? So when you get it don't sit right, right? Because you come to work every day, you feel like you work hard, you contribute, you are doing your part in making the organization or the company or the institution a better place. And then for somebody to come and say, you're not doing this the way I wanted you to do it, or I want to give you some feedback on how you can be more productive or more self-aware. I think if it's not delivered to a person in a way that it seems like it's valuable, I think it's just uncomfortable, right? People don't want to be told how they can, where their shortcomings are, right? So I think that's the first thing, right? I think people are resistant too, because it may be because of who the feedback is coming from, right? So I've seen people, not want to receive feedback from somebody who's got fewer years of experience than them, right? Or somebody who's not worked in their particular field or industry before, right? Or in my mind is not as competent as I am, or is not as good as I am. So how dare you tell me how to be a better presenter? Or how dare you tell me how to be a better leader or a better manager? I think that happens.
Yeah, thanks.
And then going back to what I said earlier, I think there's also discomfort in like the positive side of the feedback. So not necessarily resistant to it, right? But just, I feel like people have been wired to not be able to take constructive, like the good feedback, like the things they're really, really good at. Sometimes we pass it off as, whatever, I appreciate it, or you don't really internalize it like you should. So I think that is both of those just put you in a really, really difficult situation. And because, I mentioned earlier, people are always watching. I tell, any opportunity I get to talk to aspiring leaders, I tell them that we are watching people all the time. Like I am constantly looking for talent, constantly, right? Constantly. And what separates the star from like the rock star is their willingness to receive feedback and their willingness to decide whether or not the feedback is applicable, right, or useful in that moment. Because I think another piece of it is, I've gotten feedback that I've said, thank you, I appreciate that, and just kind of shelved it and not disregarded it, right? But like, okay, this feedback is useful, but maybe not for this moment right now, right? Didn't disregard it, but I didn't allow it to derail me or to make me feel any type of way. So the folks that are willing to receive the feedback, the ones that are willing to make the adjustments, the ones that are willing to listen, the ones that recognize it's coming from a place of like care and compassion and coaching. And they do steps 2, 3, and 4, which is they receive the feedback, they apply it, they evaluate it, and then they scale it, right? Or they figure out how they can make that piece of feedback better, or how they can take the feedback they were given and enhance it in a way where it is now a strength or a stronger skill. I mean, that in itself tells a greater story about the person's character, their capacity. And I want anybody like that on my team, right? That can take it, apply it, evaluate it, make it better, and then keep that loop going. And but it doesn't feel good. I mean, you don't want anybody to tell you that, you know, you gotta, you come off as being a little too egotistical like that. You know, I got that the first part of my career, right? And like, oh, that don't feel good. What you mean? I mean, I'm just confident, right?
Yeah.
But over time, I can see how I came off as being a little egotistical, right? So how do I then exhibit a level of humility, right? Like I don't want to lose that part of me, right? I mean, you know, that's the A to B mentality, right? You can't shed
100%.
that.
No, 100%.
Right? But there's also a side of humility that I can make people see and highlight a little bit more, man. So and I think people it doesn't feel good, man. It doesn't feel good. But when you apply it, man, sky's the limit.
Very well said. I think very, very well said. I mean, you hit on a lot of different points. I'm not gonna hit on all of them, but you know, some of the ones that kind of stood out to me was I think we talk a lot about sometimes the negative aspects of feedback that we sometimes receive, or let me say that called negative. Let's just say opportunities, right?
Yeah.
Right. Let's just say the opportunities that sometimes we receive that we don't always have a hard time receiving, but the positive ones too, right? Like you mentioned, that sometimes, or a lot of times, people they don't want to focus as much on the positives, right? So we focus only on what we need to fix, what we need to change, what we need to work on. It's like, whoa, let's take some time here and really highlight what you're doing well and what you're executing on, right? And especially if you've been working on something and you've been being very intentional about honing your skills in a particular way, and now you've become great at that. Hey, let's showcase that, right? And someone gives you a high five, like, hey, man, great job at that presentation. And so I say, hey, thank you. I've been working on this for the last 2 weeks, and I've been putting a lot of time and effort into it. So I really appreciate you acknowledging this and being able to see the fruits of my hard work. Nothing wrong with that, right? Nothing wrong with that at all, right? So, but I think there's a lot of elements that play into that. I think imposter syndrome is something that comes into mind to me a lot.
Absolutely.
You know, I think that's a big element of why people don't have a hard time receiving the positive feedback, right? So they're still trying to figure it out. They're not sure about themselves, and so it kind of comes out in ways of like, oh yeah, it was no big deal, you know.
Absolutely.
You also mentioned about who gives the feedback, right? You shared the example about Mel, right, giving you that, you know, tough feedback, and I think self-awareness still is a big key element in all of these things. Is being recognize who you are, how you react to things. I know the word trigger, you know, your trigger is right, kind of. That's a very common, you know, kind of phrase or whatever, right? But I think, you know, what triggers you, I think it's important to kind of understand and know that, and then be able to know how to respond, not react, right? And I just really hope our folks who are listening here are just really writing this stuff down and figuring out ways to apply this stuff, because that's what it boils down to. It's about application. It's about seeing this stuff through, right? It's about, you know, continuing that constant loop. So, and nobody has this down, right? Nobody's perfect, right? We're all going to continue working on this, man. For anybody who may be listening to this and listening to your story and thinking like, man, Jackie's just really dropping a ton of gems. I can truly relate to, you know, his story and just all the things that he has been sharing about how he's kind of gone through his career and how he's dealt with just giving and receiving feedback. How would you maybe encourage them, right, to take action, right, in order to kind of propel themselves in their own career to the next level?
I would say, you know, don't worry about the credit. The experience is more valuable. I think a lot of people are focused on, you know, their name on the PowerPoint slide, versus the value in the experience. I think something I tell people all the time is the importance of remembering what other people forget. I think that has been
that's a bar.
It's been so clutch.
Yeah, that's a bar.
It's been so clutch, man. Just that skill, and because people forget things, right? Particularly in the work environment, right? My goal has always been, in relation to anything that my supervisor, in this instance, the president, asked me to do, I always write it down. I never forget it. I always want to be the person that, if she forgets it, I did it. Right. And that's happened several times, and it's beared so much fruit. So I think that is definitely something I'd recommend. Like, don't worry about the credit. The experience is more important. I think remember what other people forget. I think the other thing that I would say, if anybody, whoever's trying to get to the next level, like, you have got to tell us where you're trying to go. I made the mistake early on of like waiting for somebody to be like, yo, this brother is talented. Let me grab him and put him under my wing and help him navigate this experience. Right. And that doesn't take away from the people who did do that in some way in my career. Right. But I literally was like, I'm walking into the building and somebody like, yo, man, you heard about this kid Jackie? We got to get him. Right. That doesn't happen. Right.
Facts. Yeah. Facts.
Or it didn't happen for me. Right.
No. I get you. Yeah.
My point, though, is that can happen if people know what you want to do. So I've found that, when I'm talking with folks who are interested, or, I get meetings all the time, but they want to sit down and they want to pick my brain or talk about, how I've been able to navigate my career in a way that's moved pretty quickly and have all been, opportunities for advancement. And I always told folks, I aspire to be a college president. I mean, that's a fact. You know what I mean? So people were never unclear about what the end goal was. So I've got folks who I'm like, yo, I don't know what you want to do. And if I don't know what you want to do, that means I can't help you. Right. I mean, I can help you. Right. But if you were like, yo, I want to move into administration, but you've not told me that, then I'm going to support you as an employee. I'm going to give you the skills and experiences you need to be successful. But I want to be even more intentional. So the last thing I would just offer is, you got to tell folks, right? You've got to let people know what you want to do. You want to be a dean, you want to be a president, you want to be a vice president, you want to be a chief information officer or a chief strategy officer. And even if it's not that specific, at least saying, I really see myself in like executive leadership. I really see myself managing people. That allows me and my colleagues to be so much more intentional in how we craft experiences for you, how we identify opportunities, how we connect you with people. So I think if there's somebody in the audience that, not only in higher ed, right, but is working somewhere and want to move up, don't worry about the credit. The experience is more important. Remember what other people forget, right? You got to let us know what you want to do, right? You got to tell somebody, because if not, we can't help you,
Fact. Yeah. Bro, man, well said, man. With that last point, man, really, all of them resonated with me, honestly.
It makes me think about one more thing I used to tell people all the time. So the other thing that really helped me out is that I took the stuff that nobody wanted to take and I made it valuable. So I added value to functions or departments that people often overlooked, right? And that was extremely beneficial in my career, right? Because it showed just my ability to build to take something, to put some strategy and structure behind it. And then just kind of go through the whole kind of design thinking process, right? Of building and then evaluating, scale, growing. And to be able to do that with things that people oftentimes overlook, that just has been so critical for my success, right? So if there are projects that nobody wants to take on, or if there are departments that are flailing, or just spaces within your industry or in your company or organization that just need a little TLC, grab it and love the hell out of it, man, and make it great, man. Because if you can do that with something that's struggling, just imagine what you can do with something that is thriving.
Kind of bring that thing to a close, man. I definitely want to give you an opportunity to share a little bit about your contact information for anybody who wants to reach out. I know you got a business on the side. I don't know if you want to mention that as well. So, but
yeah, sure.
But I definitely want to make sure, man, if anyone who wants to reach out to you, you can share your information.
Yeah, we'll close on how we started with my government name. So you can. So I think it is Jackie C. Thomas Jr. on IG. That may also be how you can find me on Facebook, but Jackie C. Thomas Jr. We've got a family page called the Thomas League, right? So result of that feedback is kind of the birth of our family's kind of brand and our commitment to not only our marriage, but raising really amazing kids. So I think at the Thomas League, we can find what's happening with my family. And then, I do a little coaching on the side. I've got a company called Competitive Advantage Coaching. I think it is CED Coaching on Instagram as well. So, and you can do cedcoaching.com. Fela and I share the same kind of passion and commitment to helping folks really navigate this corporate world, right? And you said something to me when we were talking a while ago about the podcast. You're like, yo, man, I want you to hop on the podcast. I was like, yeah, but higher rating corporate. He's like, oh, it is. Right. So, recognizing that we work in different spaces, but share the same mission and commitment to making sure that folks, are able to navigate spaces that, may feel like they're unnavigatable at times. And for us to be able to drop any gems or share any insight or context about how to make things a little bit easier, because that for me, that's what it's about, right? I don't, I sit at that table, every other week and make decisions on behalf of the students, the faculty, staff, the community. And I don't take that lightly, right? And I want to make sure that if there's somebody out there that aspires to be there, that I don't make it more difficult or more complicated for them to figure out what that path looks like. And then when they get there, what that responsibility is to sit at that table and make those decisions. So I'll just, I'll close with my brother. I salute you for what you were doing. Honored to have met you in college. Honored to have brought you into the fold of our brotherhood, man. Honored to see you grow as a businessman, as a company leader, as a husband, as a father, and man, keep doing your thing, brother.
As per Jackie's recommendation, I'm gonna receive that feedback, brother, and I very much appreciate that, bro.
There it is.
Yeah, most definitely, man. I owe a lot to you, man. So, I love the fact that we can continue on and seeing each other grow in this new way too, man. So, for all my listeners, appreciate y'all for listening. Until next time, peace.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. For more content, click the link in my bio to follow How to Corporate on all social media platforms. Until next time, keep building.